Stop. Look at your life for a second. Every group you've ever been part of had one person they could not stand, the one who did not fit, the one who refused to play along, the one who everyone quietly agrees to punish. That person was not punished by accident. They were punished because obedience was never an option. Look around you. The family that calls you difficult, the workplace that labels you not a team player, the friends who grow uncomfortable when you stop agreeing. That's not coincidence. That's enforcement. There is always that one person who doesn't fit, who doesn't nod fast enough, who doesn't repeat the right opinions, who doesn't lower his head when pressure shows up. That person becomes the problem. Here is the rule. The moment you refuse obedience, the group turns on you. Look back at your own life. The moment you stop nodding, smiling, and obeying the invisible rules, something shifts. Pressure appears without warning. Not because you attacked anyone, but because you disrupted order. You become a threat without doing anything at all. Groups survive by eliminating what they can't control. And the most dangerous man in any group is the one who cannot be pressured into obedience. That man becomes the black sheep, not because he is weak, but because he is uncontrollable. That is the moment the law activates. Obedience was never an option. Think about this. Have you noticed how quickly pressure appears the moment you stop explaining yourself? How jokes turn into insults? How concern turns into correction? How we are just trying to help turns into quiet punishment? That is not conflict. That is control reacting to resistance. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology existed. He saw that power is not maintained by violence first, but by social pressure, by isolating the one who refuses to submit, by making independence look like a flaw. The black sheep is not rejected because they are wrong. They are rejected because they are ungovernable. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. When the group punishes you, it's not trying to correct you. It's trying to break you. Because obedience is the price of belonging, and the black sheep never pays it. Pause on that, because in this video, you're going to see the rule clearly. Why groups punish independence, why obedience is rewarded, even when it leads nowhere, and why the moment you stop seeking approval, the entire power dynamic flips. Stay with me. Once you understand this law, you'll never mistake rejection for failure again. You'll recognize it for what it really is. You'll see why some men are rejected, isolated, and attacked the moment they stop obeying. Why approval is a leash. Why independence is treated as betrayal. And why obedience was never an option if you were meant to be free. You think the black sheep is rejected because he is difficult. That's the lie the group tells itself. The truth is harsher. The black sheep is punished because he disrupts predictability. Groups do not fear evil. They fear uncontrollable behavior. The man who obeys quietly, even if he is weak, is safe to keep around. The man who questions, resists, or refuses to conform threatens the structure itself. So the group does what it has always done. It isolates him, labels him difficult, frames him as arrogant, ungrateful, unstable, or selfish. Not to correct him, but to warn everyone else. This is social enforcement. You've seen it before. In families, the one who refuses to follow tradition becomes the problem child. In workplaces, the one who questions authority becomes not a team player. In friend groups, the one who stops tolerating disrespect becomes different. Nothing about their behavior changed. Only their obedience did. And the moment obedience disappears, pressure replaces respect. Here is what most people never understand about the black sheep. The group doesn't exile you because you're wrong. It exiles you because you're dangerous. Dangerous to their comfort. Dangerous to their shared lies. Dangerous to the silent agreement everyone else has signed without reading. Groups don't exist to protect truth. They exist to protect stability, and stability depends on obedience. The moment you stop mirroring the group's beliefs, something subtle shifts. You're no longer seen as one of us. You become a variable, an uncertainty, a threat that can't be predicted or managed. So the pressure begins. Not openly, not immediately, But consistently, your words get reframed. Your motives get questioned. Your character gets discussed when you're not in the room. This is not coincidence. It's correction. Every group has invisible rules, unspoken behaviors you're expected to follow without ever being told. Agree here, laugh there. Stay quiet about this. Accept that. When you violate those rules, the group doesn't argue with you. It disciplines you through sarcasm, through exclusion, through withdrawal of warmth and approval, because approval is how groups enforce control without force. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this clearly. He observed that power is rarely maintained through violence. It is maintained through perception, alignment, and social consequence. The group doesn't need to defeat you. It only needs to make non-compliance feel costly. That's why the black sheep is framed as difficult, ungrateful, arrogant, selfish. Not because he is, but because labeling him justifies punishing him. And here's the part most people miss. The black sheep is not rejected for failing. He's rejected for refusing to conform after seeing through the illusion. Once you see how the group thinks, you can't unsee it. And once you stop pretending, you become unmanageable. That's when enforcement escalates, not to change your mind, but to make an example out of you. Because if one person can disobey and survive, the entire system is at risk. So the message is sent: fall back in line, or stand alone. This is why so many people retreat back into conformity the moment resistance costs them comfort. They don't fear being wrong. They fear being alone. So they soften their edges, they rephrase their truth. They compromise their instincts, and in doing so they trade autonomy for acceptance. The black sheep doesn't make this trade, and that is why the group cannot tolerate him. Because every man who refuses obedience exposes the lie that obedience is necessary, and that is dangerous. Stay with me, because next you'll see how groups weaponize morality to enforce obedience, why guilt is their favorite tool, and how the black sheep becomes the scapegoat without ever breaking a rule. Now we move from recognition to exposure. In part 1, you saw why the black sheep is targeted, not for failure, for unpredictability. Now comes the part most people never notice: how groups finish the job. Once the group identifies someone who won't submit, it changes tactics. It doesn't argue with him. It doesn't debate him. It reframes him. This is where control tightens. The black sheep is no longer treated as an individual. He becomes a symbol. Everything uncomfortable gets projected onto him. The family's dysfunction, the workplace's incompetence, the group's unspoken fear. He becomes the container for blame, and the moment that happens, reality flips. Now the group doesn't have to ask whether he's right or wrong. They only have to ask whether he's acceptable. Truth becomes irrelevant. Alignment becomes everything. This is why the black sheep is often the most aware person in the room. Awareness threatens structure. Groups survive by repeating themselves, by preserving identity, by punishing deviation before it spreads. So they don't correct the black sheep. They isolate him emotionally. They withhold validation. They create distance. They make his resistance feel costly, not because he failed, but because others might succeed by copying him. Here's a scenario most people recognize but never name. You stop tolerating jokes at your expense. Suddenly you're too sensitive. You stop attending family events built on guilt. Suddenly you're selfish. You stop agreeing just to keep peace. Suddenly you're difficult. Nothing you did was aggressive. You simply stopped complying. And that is unforgivable to systems built on obedience. This is the moment where most people break. They don't return to obedience because they were convinced. They return because social pressure works. Loneliness, misunderstanding, subtle punishment. Those are the real chains. Machiavelli understood this mechanism clearly. He knew men are ruled less by force than by the fear of isolation. A man who cannot endure separation will always submit eventually. And here is where you must decide who you are. Because the black sheep is not born. He is chosen the moment a man decides comfort is no longer worth obedience. If this is hitting you, don't scroll. Drop this in the comments now to lock it in. Obedience was never an option. Say it once, own it. Now keep going, because next, now we expose the most effective weapon groups use. In part 2, you saw how the black sheep becomes a symbol, a container for blame, a warning sign to everyone else. Part 3 is where control becomes invisible. Now here's the layer most people never see. Once the group isolates the black sheep emotionally, it introduces a softer weapon. Not force, not anger. Concern. Not real concern. Performative concern. This is where obedience is reintroduced without force. No one tells you to obey. They tell you they are worried. They ask if you're okay. They say you've changed. They suggest something is wrong with you. Not as an accusation, as care. This is deliberate. Concern allows pressure to masquerade as love. It makes resistance look cruel. It reframes autonomy as harm. Now the story changes. You are no longer disobedient. You are hurting people. Your refusal to comply is recoded as emotional damage. Your boundaries become aggression. Your distance becomes punishment. This is how morality replaces violence. You've seen this before. You set boundaries, and suddenly you're told you're cold. You stop explaining yourself, and suddenly you're arrogant. You refuse to participate in rituals that drain you, and suddenly you're not the same person anymore. That phrase is not an observation. It's a correction attempt. They are trying to pull you back into a familiar version they can predict. Because the version of you that complies is useful. The version that doesn't is dangerous. This is why guilt appears next. Not loud guilt, subtle guilt. Let me show you the pattern. In families, they say they miss the old you. They say you're breaking hearts. They say your independence is selfish. Not because it is, but because guilt pulls harder than commands. In workplaces, they say your attitude affects the team. They say your silence is negative. They say your standards are unrealistic. Not because they are, but because dissent wrapped in concern spreads doubt. In relationships, they say they feel abandoned. They say you're cold. They say they just want communication. What they want is access. What they want is leverage. This is the genius of guilt. It forces you to argue against goodness. It puts you on defense without attacking you directly. It turns your strength into a moral failing. And here is the critical shift. At this stage, the group no longer wants obedience openly. It wants self-correction. If you start explaining yourself again, it worked. If you start softening your stance, it worked. If you start questioning your instincts, it worked. Because once guilt takes root, enforcement becomes automatic. You police yourself. This is why morality is the sharpest tool. It costs the group nothing, and it makes resistance feel ugly. And here's the part that exposes the entire mechanism. If your behavior only becomes a problem when it stops benefiting others, then the problem was never your behavior, it was your non-compliance. This is how the black sheep is psychologically pressured to return. Not with threats, with emotion, because emotion is cheaper than force. Most people cave here, not because they are weak, but because they confuse harmony with safety. They think restoring peace will restore respect. It never does. Compliance does not earn acceptance. It earns permission to be used again. This is why Machiavelli warned that men who depend on approval are already ruled. A man who needs to be liked can always be steered. A man who needs to belong can always be corrected. And now comes the turning point. Because once you recognize this pattern, you stop internalizing their reaction. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" And you start asking, "What did I stop doing for them?" That question changes everything. Stay with me. Because next you'll see why groups fear the black sheep more than open enemies, and how simply remaining unmoved destabilizes entire social structures. That's where real power begins. Here is the part that makes people uncomfortable, because it exposes the bargain they never admit they made. Because now we move past reaction and into consequence. In part 3, you saw the turning point. The moment you stop asking what you did wrong, and start asking what you stopped doing for them. That shift removes guilt. And when guilt disappears, something dangerous happens. You stop moving. And this is what groups fear more than enemies. An enemy fights. An enemy reacts. An enemy proves engagement. The black sheep who remains unmoved does none of that. He does not argue. He does not defend. He does not seek resolution. He simply exists outside the emotional economy of the group. And that destabilizes everything. Because social systems depend on feedback, approval, resistance, shame, reward. When you stop responding to those signals, the system loses grip. This is why open enemies are easier to manage than quiet non-participants. Enemies unify the group. Enemies justify control. Enemies reinforce identity. The black sheep who remains calm does the opposite. He exposes how fragile the structure actually is. Most people are not loyal to truth. They are loyal to stability. And the black sheep is dangerous because he disrupts stability without asking permission. He doesn't need to rebel loudly. He just stops cooperating with lies. That alone destabilizes the group. When you refuse to nod along, when you don't laugh at what insults your intelligence, when you don't echo beliefs you no longer respect, the group feels exposed, not threatened. Exposed, because your presence proves something they don't want to face. That obedience was a choice, and compliance was optional. This is why punishment escalates quietly. First, you're ignored. Then, you're mischaracterized. Then your motives are questioned. Not what you said, why you said it. This is critical. Once a group attacks intent instead of content, it has already lost control of the argument. So it attacks the person. They call you difficult, ungrateful, unstable, too intense, too serious. Labels are not explanations. They are containment tools. The goal is not to defeat you. It's to make others afraid to resemble you. This is how obedience is enforced socially, not through force, through example. Watch closely. No one argues with the black sheep directly. They talk around him, about him, to others. That's not confidence. That's fear of contamination, because independence spreads faster than compliance. Let me show you what this looks like in real time. In social circles, when you stop defending yourself, arguments lose fuel. When you stop explaining, manipulation has nothing to grab. Silence reveals how much noise was needed to keep you in place. And here is the line most people never cross. Once you realize this, you stop trying to be understood. You stop clarifying. You stop defending. You stop translating yourself into something palatable. Because explanation is an invitation to negotiate your position. And you are not negotiating. You are withdrawing consent. This is the moment the power dynamic locks in. They cannot control you. They cannot shame you back. They cannot scare you into alignment. All they can do is watch. And that silence you hold, that's not absence. That's authority. Sit with that. Because next, you'll see why the black sheep is always remembered, why groups rewrite history to justify rejecting him, and why obedience was never an option the moment you saw through the pattern. That's where this law becomes irreversible. Here is the part most people never reach, because this is where everything breaks. Up to now, the group believed one thing: that pressure would work, that guilt would work, that isolation would bend you. Part 5 is what happens when none of it does. This is the moment the system realizes you are no longer correctable. And that realization terrifies it, because a black sheep who cannot be pulled back exposes the final weakness of every group: dependence. Groups can tolerate weakness. They can tolerate failure. They can even tolerate rebellion, as long as it is loud and predictable. What they cannot tolerate is indifference to approval. The moment you stop needing validation, the hierarchy collapses. Because hierarchy survives on one lie: that belonging is more valuable than self-direction. The black sheep exposes this lie without saying a word. He doesn't beg to stay. He doesn't threaten to leave. He simply removes his emotional investment. And this is where fear sets in. Not fear of losing you, fear of losing control over meaning. Because once one person steps outside the script, others begin to question why they are still following it. This is why groups rewrite history. They don't say, "He saw through us." They say, "He was always difficult. He changed. He thinks he's better." That narrative protects the group from self-examination. Understand this clearly. If you are labeled the problem, it means you disrupted a system that depended on silence. That label is not a verdict. It is evidence. And here is the point of no return. Once you accept the role of the black sheep, you stop trying to be reintegrated. You don't chase closure. You don't ask for fairness. You don't demand understanding. You understand something far more dangerous. That obedience was never an option once you became conscious. From that moment forward, your power no longer comes from alignment. It comes from sovereignty. You choose when to engage. You choose when to speak. You choose when to walk away. And the group feels it, because you are no longer reacting to incentives they control. You are not motivated by fear of exclusion. You are not stabilized by praise. You are not corrected by shame. That makes you unpredictable, and unpredictability terrifies systems built on compliance. This is why the black sheep is always isolated first and remembered last, because he proves something the group cannot afford to admit. That obedience was a habit, not a law, and the moment you broke it, there was no putting the structure back together. Most people will hear this and rush back to the group. They will explain it away. They will water it down. They will pretend it doesn't apply to them. And here is the quiet truth. This channel exists for the few who recognize the pattern and refuse to step back into it. For the ones who stopped asking for permission. For the ones who accepted isolation over obedience. If this video articulated something you felt but never named, lock it in. Like the video. Not for the algorithm, for alignment. It signals you're no longer reacting blindly. Share it, because someone else is still blaming themselves for a system designed to break them. And subscribe, not because you want content, but because this is where the laws get exposed before they're used on you. This channel doesn't comfort, it corrects. And once you see how power actually works, there is no going back. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.